This is David Neese with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock market today. I have my guest engineer, Mike Herzog, with me today. How's it going today, Mike?
Great, David. Glad to be here again.
Great. Yeah, and it's always nice. I've had really good views. So a lot of the stuff we've talked about has done quite well. First off today, I want to talk about what's going on in Germany with Tesla. So Tesla in their Giga factory Berlin has announced they're going to make a 25,000 euro Tesla car. Now we're assuming this is the Model 2. They've really been a little bit they haven't been really quite coming out, but 25,000 euros is just under $27,000. And if that comes to United States, and then you start throwing the federal tax credit on it, you got a really inexpensive automobile for the US market.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's great news. Plus, with the brand recognition and cachet that Tesla brings along with it, that price point, you'd have to think that would be start to become a good option. They've seemed to have done it right around here in a lot of ways with building out the infrastructure and starting to see the fast charging stations go in and more around that. And you'd hope that this makes that more accessible to a lot of people at that entry price point.
well, it's certainly, I tell people all the time, if your first electric car is a Tesla and you get to experience the Tesla charging network, if you use a charging network at all, most people that have one don't even use the charging networks, which is what I always find kind of fascinating about the discussion about lack of charging networks. And then you have people like my friend who just drove his BMW i3 with an 80-mile range to Arizona and back. And then he's lamenting the lack of charging stations or places he can charge around the Phoenix metro. And
Hmm.
I found that to be quite fascinating, to hear his discussions on what he was doing. But the BMW i3 also has um, a gas generator, and it holds 2 gallons of fuel, and he can add another 100 miles to it with the
Okay.
2 gallons of fuel. So it ends up still working out. He can, if he has to, he can go for a 200-mile stretch without
See, and
worrying
that's
about it.
that's pretty reasonable too. I mean, 200 miles. I mean, just you think about driving. That's a couple hours on the road and ready to stretch your legs anyway. And what that looks like, and that makes sense. And I've started to see more and more of that where they do have as opposed to like a combustion engine, they're going that generator model where it's you're still producing electricity, but not in the traditional combustion engine way. You're still using your electric drivetrain, but it's being charged through a combustion motor, which is really interesting and hopefully starts to solve some of that range anxiety and some of those other issues where it's, hey, at the end of the day I can still pop into a gas station and get a couple extra miles if I need to when it comes out.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit with Bill yesterday. So this is an article from Reuters talking about the Hemi fades away as Stellantis electrifies the Ram trucks, and they're phasing out the V8 Hemi, but they're bringing out a gas engine that's basically just power, or they're using gas to power an electric or a gas generator that is then going to
Mhm.
power the electric motor, which has about 600 horsepower. And they're claiming a almost 700-mile range doing it this way on the Dodge Ram trucks, and they'll have a basic like plug-in hybrid type model
Yep.
where they have a 145-mile range of just pure EV. Now, the thing about this is if you're plugging in, for most people, you don't ever engage the gas motor. Okay, so on some
Mhm.
of these, and this is like even the Toyota Prius Prime, which is a plug-in hybrid, has about a 50-mile range of just pure EV. But if you need the gas motor, you can actually go another 450 miles on it the way it's structured, and it has about a, 55, 60-mile per gallon fuel economy when you do it that way. But obviously, when you're in the electric portion, it doesn't hit it much. I know that I've looked at that new Aptera like solar vehicle that looks like a Cessna
Yeah,
rolling down the road.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it has a 40-mile daily charge from solar, and most people aren't going to use that on a daily basis, and the battery will actually hold 400 miles. So it's their
Mhm.
estimates where if you drove 10,000 miles a year, you might actually charge it like 8 times. And this is including charging at home. You know, that they
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
assuming you were leaving the vehicle outside. Now, of course, that's assuming a sunny climate. And you know, it's funny where we live up north. If you go to like North Dakota,
Hmm.
Idaho, Wyoming, those states have really blue skies, even throughout the winter.
Yep.
And it's just that the sun is not up as many hours, and I don't know how well that plays out with solar and stuff like that, but it is kind of unique to see that.
It
But it,
is, and you're touching on something that's interesting in that space too, where so many of these, and I think this is a lot of trepidation from folks getting into this space. We build statistics, we write articles based on averages, and hey, on average it should look like this, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting as these start to play out of the high peaks and the low valleys where hey we're Midwesterners. We go a week or two where we don't see a lot of sun in the winter. It's just a lot of gray skies and overcast and everything like that. So I think as more and more people go through that and see those experiences, and I don't think that's necessarily a negative. I think it's just something for folks to overcome as they get in that space where what I don't need this charged every day, or what does this look like? Hey, just that little trickle coming in a couple of days in the winter is enough to get the miles I need, for that
right.
day and what that looks like. And yeah, you might end up in that scenario still, even in those dreary winter months where it's just enough to peek through. I parked it out in the lot at work all day, and it was just enough to get me those couple extra miles. That's my commute, and that was
You,
it.
you know, it's interesting because a lot of people they're like, "Oh, you have this, electric car, and everybody has one. They're going to be charging them to max every day between, 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. and crash the grid." And the truth is, you really don't need to charge it that often.
No.
It's like you're not running to the gas station every day and filling up, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, I
And
don't top my tank off every time I come home, and what that looks like. And I use cell phones as the example of that. It's depending on who you are and your personality and what it looks like. I'm a plug it in when I get home kind of person, and what it looks like. But the reality is, I don't know, plug it in every day or two. What that looks like, and I still have plenty. And I don't feel really comfortable when those, the battery charge is getting low. But the reality is, like, I can get the rest of my day out of it and be fine and make it on the way home. So I think as more and more people get that experience and comfort level, that's where the biggest gains are going to be made. Where I can live on the edge a little bit with this.
I suspect I probably charge my phones too much. You know,
Yeah.
it is weird though because it's like, oh, my phone's at half charge. I better, and in
Yeah.
reality, it'd probably last another 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it just
Yeah.
seems like, oh, well, what if the power goes out and I don't have
Yeah.
phone?
I know,
I
and
want
the
to,
counter to that, unfortunately, is we've all had that experience where the phone died when I needed
right.
it and it was critical and it was darn it, I wish I would have plugged this in 8 hours ago when I had the chance, or overnight, and I just didn't, and what it looks like. So, um, that's losing your cell phone, and some of those experiences not fun, but it's on the same hand, it's losing your vehicle's charge. It's probably going to be a bigger deal.
Oh yeah, no,
For a lot
no,
of
no
folks.
doubt. Um, but anyways, getting back to the Tesla in Germany, let's see. And investors have been waiting to hear more on Tesla's cheaper Generation 3 platform or the most. One of the things that Tesla is doing is this whole. Have you looked at Giga casting yet?
Mm-mm.
What's going so when you're making a car underneath there's like 40 different parts that are all bolted onto the body or
Yeah.
whatever. So Tesla is doing all of that as one single casting. And it used to be theories this couldn't be done, but they figured out how to do it.
Mm.
And they're it's going to shave thousands of dollars and hours of time and labor and everything of being able to put a car together. And so this is basically, leave it to Tesla came up with a way to fix the way cars have been made. Now, in all fairness, some of these things may not have worked well with an internal combustion engine car. Okay. So I'm assuming there's something to the fact that it's electric and there's fewer moving parts that's allowing this to happen. But
Yeah,
but it's a big change, and I've already seen articles where Toyota is trying to figure out how they're going to adapt to this because it's such a big threat with somebody coming in and having a huge price
precast car.
advantage.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
they're
that's
really cutting down by thousands on the cost of making the car, and this should benefit consumers at some point. It may be a trickle down thing. It may take
yeah.
10 years, but at some point, somewhere in there, it's going to lower the cost of cars because the pricing is going to become more competitive.
That's
You know,
fantastic, and it's I'm always glad to see innovations like that in these spaces because my background's in the power grid, and I always say to people, boy, if we were going to build the power grid from scratch today, it wouldn't look like it does today, with new technologies and the way things change and the way people use their power and what's available. And I think the same is going to be true for automobiles, where it's as you start to look at it with electricity and the fewer moving parts and everything like that, if somebody goes back to the drawing board and say, hey, we can build this from the ground up again today, it might look different. We don't you don't need the giant automobile to go to the grocery store, or different things like that. Yeah, it's some people use those and that's great, and they need the towing capacity and everything like that. But truly, for the modern function of a car in our cities and society, like it probably doesn't need to look like it does today. It could look very different.
I've seen a lot of things that I feel would be good solutions. I know Bill's real big on the bicycle and the motorcycle and all that. I think that's some of that is all fine and good for people who are in their 20s and 30s. And then you start getting people get a little older, may not be feel so good about their balance and um, you know, things like that. And I don't know if you've ever looked at this company, Archimoto. So Archimoto is they're on the Nasdaq as FUV
Mhm.
for Fun Utility Vehicle, and it's essentially a motorcycle with two wheels in the front. You've probably
Mhm.
seen the gas-powered slingshots, but it only has one person in front, one in back, or it's
A
configured
little storage,
as a
yeah.
delivery vehicle. And these are about, I think they're about 25,000 dollars, and they really have a lot of practicality. Of course, if you're configured, yeah, starting at 19,900,
Yeah.
and you look at something like that. I mean, here in Nebraska, you're probably still talking about where here we are in a month ago, you wouldn't have been driving this. So, you look at October through March, you got at least 6 months. You're not going to drive one of
Mhm.
these in Nebraska, so it'd just be sitting around. But this thing's pretty quick, 75 miles per hour,
Yeah.
102 mile per hour range. They're 100% electric. I mean, very little operating costs. I can only imagine how little or how many miles you get because it's saying 100 miles. I bet it's not even a 10 kilowatt hour battery.
No. I bet
You know,
it's a tiny little thing,
yeah,
just to keep weight down, for
right.
something you didn't put too much on there.
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to have a battery that's less than a tenth the size of one in a car,
Mhm.
and here you've got this, you know, fun vehicle.
Yeah.
And I look at different ideas on mobility. This seems a little more practical because you're probably a lot less likely to have a car pull out in front of you. That's where motorcycles
And
have a
motorcycles
lot
and
of their
especially bicycles,
accidents.
yeah.
Yeah, and I used to like riding bicycles a lot, and I've been hit twice.
Yeah.
And it's not a pleasant experience to be the bicycle rider who gets, you know, that gets hit. So, that
Mhm.
gets a little different. Anyways, I got something here that's kind of fun. And this is a expensive EV coming out of Japan. And I always like these ones on some of these because some of these are just crushing it speed wise. I don't
Yeah,
know if I
yeah.
would fit in this. I'm looking at this and I'm like, how would I climb into this? As a 6'3" individual, I don't know. how well I would fit into it. This is the Aspark Owl,
Mhm.
one of the most expensive EVs ever built, and it comes from assembly lines in Italy. And it was originally conceived in Italy, or I'm sorry, in Japan, but it was made in Italy. And this is quite interesting. Most powerful four electric motors ever made, producing 1,980 horsepower and 1,400 foot-pounds of torque, 250 miles. Oh, there we go. 250 miles of range. Well,
Yeah.
there we go. That seems adequate to make this your daily driver. And yeah, it can go 0 to 60 in 1.72 with a top speed of 260. And when it's interesting, two Guinness World Records. I know a while back I reviewed the Rimac Navara, and it's just crazy that this is, you know,
Oh, that'd be
another
passing
car.
it. Yeah.
An eighth of a mile at an average speed of 192.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Um,
That's what I think is one of the missing selling points with so many of the EVs. They're really fun to drive. Um,
yeah,
the
except for the Mazda
acceleration is
MX-30.
just crazy.
Mazda, leave it to Mazda to make one that does 0 to 60 in like 9.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, but this is like an old diesel.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the thing. Is like, hey, if you like speed, electric cars are fast,
Yeah.
you know. And but it's interesting to see. Yeah. So this is $3.1 million. So basically you're buying a race car. Oh, but if you get it fully tricked out with a fully carbon fiber body, it goes up to 3.75 million.
I might spring for that extra. Just
Yeah, I
it's
wonder what the
for 3 million.
delivery.
I'll
Yeah, I
spring for
wonder
the
what
extra.
the rust proofing and undercoating
The
add.
undercoating. Yeah.
Yeah, and floor mats. Yeah, add on to the price. And it's not the most expensive EV. Hypercar manufacturer Automobili
Mhm.
Pininfarina snagged the crown from Aspark, announced its Barchetta EV, $4.72 million. At least the Spark will be limited edition. They're only making 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't that crazy? 260 miles per hour. Here, and for our last article, we're going to
Mhm.
talk about something a little more down to earth. And this
On the
is,
opposite end
yeah, the
of the
opposite
EV
end.
world.
The Kia EV6 GT was announced as Time Magazine's best invention of 2023. And I thought that that's kind of an entertaining thing for Time Magazine. But here's what one looks like. We don't see a lot of these around Nebraska. When I was in Florida recently and in Arizona, I saw a lot of these that really were quite
Mhm.
popular. And anyways, 2024 EV6 GT earned Road and Track Performance EV of the Year under $100,000. Delivers 576 horsepower, only needs 18 minutes to charge from 10% to 80%. And this is
That's
something kind of
insane. That's
interesting.
great. Yeah,
Is
that's a great number.
why don't people charge above 80% at a public charger?
Um, I think there's one. It's battery stress is one reason, and I think a lot of manufacturers, the recommended limit, I shouldn't say limit, that's a bit harsh, but the recommended charging level is 80%. You don't want to take it all the way to 100% on a daily basis. Same, you don't necessarily want to charge it to 0% on a daily basis. So I think that's more of a stress thing that it puts on the battery, and especially with lithium technology, the quicker you charge, the more battery degradation you can have in some of those spaces. So I think that's one of the numbers people try to put out there a lot of, hey, charging it to that 80%. You're not taking it all the way. 80% is still a lot of miles, and you're at that speed charging, not kind of getting into that danger zone with the battery where you can cause premature end of life. or degradation over life in that period.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Anyone who has driven the Kia EV6 GT knows what the powerful EV can do. Thanks to its horsepower and performance, it performs like a supercar, but for a fraction of the price. And it continues to rack up awards. Time Magazine recognition only supports the 2023 World Performance Car and North American Utility Vehicle of the Year award, both from notable automotive journalists. 3.4 seconds, 0 to 60.
Yeah,
Still not
for
1.7
not
seconds.
1.7,
It's
but
only half as
for a
fast as the
Kia,
last car.
yeah, a Kia hatchback. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
fun, right? That would be a fun car
Yes.
to drive.
Yes. A sticker price around $60,000. So you could buy 50 of those with the money you paid for that Aspark. You could equip your whole neighborhood
Yeah,
with these, you know. Um, but let's see. But it's interesting that it charges so fast.
yeah,
That is really some unique charging technology for it to be doing that and that quickly. Let's see. Um, and like I said, it had the award from Road and Track. And I just thought this was kind of an interesting piece. Let's see. The Tesla Model S Plaid earned the 2024 Performance EV of the Year, priced over
I was gonna
100,000.
say, what's the price category on that one?
Yeah, beating
Little
out the
bit different market, but
Mercedes AMG EQS and the Taycan Turbo, which I find pretty impressive. I
mhm.
mean, that's uh, that's all good stuff.
It's good
But
company, right? It's
yeah,
good company to be with
yeah,
those vehicles.
it sure is. Anyways, Mike, that's all we had for today. I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, you betcha. I
And
always appreciate the invite. It's fun to talk EVs.
oh, it is, and I have a good time with this show. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and cut the stream. Everybody, thanks for listening.